welcome to the next edition of Reclaiming My Mind. I'm your host, Jessica Vaughn, also the president of the Democratic Progressive Caucus of Tampa Bay. And today we're excited. We have Kimberly Overman with us. Kimberly is running for County Commission District 7, which is county-wide. So thank you for joining us, Kim.
Thank you, Jessica. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I see you. Did you come from the Andrew Gillum or the coordinated campaign / Andrew Gillum headquarters that opened up in Brandon?
That was one of my stops today. Actually, it was a lot of fun. I got a chance to see probably 60 or 75 volunteers that were already there. Everybody was very excited. And they gave me a chance to actually open the meeting and get everybody riled up. So it was fun. It was a lot of fun.
And did you go to the one yesterday as well?
I did.
Wow. Okay. So for people who don't know, like I said, you're running for County Commission. That's Hillsborough County. To start off, tell me a little bit about yourself, like where you grew up. Tell me about your schooling, family, your interests. Tell me a little bit about Kimberly.
Okay. Well, I was born in New York City, and we moved to Texas after that.
Wow.
And then we moved to Louisiana, and then we moved to the Washington, D.C. area. My father was a speechwriter and worked on political campaigns. My mom was a nurse. And so I had a man that thought that he could solve the problems of the world and a woman that was going to make everybody well. But it was a good family. There were 5 children in the family. And Texas was there when Kennedy got shot.
Wow.
So that left an impact on my life in terms of how passionate it can be, but also how dangerous sometimes it can be.
Right.
But you got to have that passion to stay in the game. Then we moved to Louisiana. My father got an opportunity because they were paying poll taxes there to vote at that time in the 60s. He found out by those individuals that could pay poll taxes, he could get the data of those that had paid it. And he created what's called boiler rooms or phone banking.
Oh.
And it was written up in Time magazine for his ingenuity in terms of ways of getting voters out. As a consequence of that, the gentleman he was working for got elected. And we moved to Washington, D.C. And I grew up there and went to University of Maryland. Enjoyed that. I got an agricultural resource economics degree, which is a Bachelor of Science in Economics, basically, with an agricultural focus. Got married, have 2 sons that live in the Tampa Bay area, and moved to Tampa in 1984 with my husband at the time, and have raised my family here. Started a business about 20 years ago, working as a certified financial planner and a registered investment advisor.
All right. Well, I did not know that about you, so I'm glad I asked. Quite an interesting background. And since you have such an interesting background, generally I don't ask about this, but I've seen it on your literature, and it was quite pronounced in the Progressive Caucus endorsement. You're a member of quite a few organizations. It's a very long list. So can you just highlight a few of those and tell me a little bit about some of them, and maybe tell me about how many? I can't have you go through all of them. We'll be here all day, but tell me about that background.
That is true. I am what's called a serial volunteer. I do believe in public service. So whether or not I was running for office as I am now, but as a citizen, one of the things I learned as a child is that you participated. So that included voting, but also helping out your neighbor and working in your community. So ever since I arrived in Tampa, I volunteer in a variety of organizations. I helped found an organization called the Business and Professional Roundtable, which is a group of business owners and community leaders that were interested in talking about what was happening in Tampa Bay and sharing that information not only with private enterprise, but also with the government. I've served in the leadership position in both the financial planning industry and the estate planning industry, and also to the state level, where we advocated in Tallahassee on protecting seniors against fraudulent annuity sales, as well as making sure that people that were licensed were actually found when they were not doing business in a good way. So in the industry-wide, those were things that I did. On the community service side, I've served Seniors in Service, Voices for Children, those organizations that take care of those that are most vulnerable. And then on the government service side, I've served on the Housing Finance Authority, which is the bonding agency that offers low-income individuals or those that need bond helpfulness in buying a home for their first time or in the last 3 years now, purchase a home in order to stay in their community. I've served as the Citizens Advisory Committee member on the City of Tampa's budget and finance. And that's where I learned how important it was for me to run county.
Gotcha.
As I found that they were in learning a great deal about what the city and how it operated and what their budgets looked like.
Right.
Many of the bigger challenges that we need to be addressed now are made at the county level. And then currently, when I found that out, I chose to get appointed, or actively a petition to get appointed to the Citizens Advisory Committee to the Metropolitan Planning Organization.
Which a lot of people don't know about.
Right. The Metropolitan Planning Organization is the body of leaders in our community, with partially the Board of County Commission, the school board, the airport, the port, various different organizations, and the three cities, Plant City, Temple Terrace, and the city of Tampa, all have a representative that sit on that board so that local decisions on what happens in our transportation plan are actually developed and through the Planning Commission. And they work in partnership with FDOT, which is the Florida Department of Transportation. I commonly call the Florida Department of Roads, but their legal name is actually the Florida Transportation.
Right.
And then work with HART as well. So it's important that that is the overall deciding factor on how our transportation programs go. And so I thought, well, being a citizen offering advice on this from the citizen's perspective would be a good thing to do.
Right. So it sounds like there's a heavy financial background and commerce, but also mixed with some civic engagement, making sure that you're being the voice for people who are voiceless, and then also a passion for transportation, which any of us who know you know that's at the forefront of your platform for sure.
Right.
So tell me shortly, what inspired you to run? Now, I know you said that obviously you have it in your family and then you've volunteered in a lot of different ways. So it might have sounded like a good fit in the next step, especially if you're passionate about some of the issues. Is that what inspired you, or was there anything else?
Well, it was a combination of a lot of things. I watched leaders, if you want to call them that. I watched our leadership ignore a very large population in our communities.
And which population is that, do you think?
Mostly economically disadvantaged individuals. Oftentimes that means, persons of color, whether that be the Black community, Hispanic community. But I've seen many of our policies be what I called economically racist. They completely leave out the lower and the middle class,
the working class,
in a majority of the decisions that are being made on how our community grows and what services we provide.
Right.
And I found that to be very challenging. I moved to the middle of the city, in the middle of the county,
right,
because I wanted to live in a diverse community and help that community grow and thrive. Only to find out that I couldn't run in it. I moved to a minority designated district, and I'm apparently the wrong minority for that. But and which is why I'm running countywide.
Sure.
It's the best way I can serve.
It's a big undertaking.
It is. I will tell you, this county, I have been in places I didn't even know exist in the last year and a half.
Sure. So tell me who you're running against. I don't know much about your opponent because I don't believe he's an incumbent. So I don't really know much about who you're running against. Tell me a little bit about, it's a he, right?
There's actually two.
Oh, that's right. Sorry, I forgot. I've only taken one seriously so far.
Well, and that's probably fair. This is Al Higginbotham's seat. He decided not to run. So it's an open seat.
Right.
There's not an incumbent.
Correct.
When I first got started, I was running against an incumbent, but that was running from District 1 into 7. And I had Sky White as an opponent in that race. And when I was looking forward to actually learning more about her as that race unfolded. But when Sandy Merman decided not to resign to run, then it got really interesting.
It did.
Every day somebody else joined the race. So we went from a 3-person race to a 7-person race.
Right. And
now we're back to a 3-person race.
Okay.
My Republican opponent is an attorney from West Chase.
Okay.
He is, his name is Todd Marks. And his platform, from what I can understand, that he doesn't mimic hearing the things I say, and now he's saying.
As a Republican.
Yeah, it's really interesting. But he's very clear about certain things. He is definitely he wants to bring Trump strategies and policies to Hillsborough County. He believes that it's critically important that the sheriff's office have the resources to make sure all the aliens,
He does not use the word aliens.
Wow. Aliens that are in our jails are actually sent somewhere else. He also is very interested in making sure that we have the resources in the sheriff's department also to keep our schools secure. So he's a fan of having guns in school. And he's very concerned about the sales taxes, and he thinks that's a bigger deal than having people be able to get to work, which is critically important with where we go in Hillsborough County going forward.
Yeah, I don't know anyone, regardless of partisan, who's not frustrated by the traffic and what it's like trying to move around the city. So that's surprising.
It's interesting. Transportation is something that's big, complex problem.
It really is.
But we have made it worse by not thinking ahead in how we've grown.
Yeah.
And it's not like we can stop building. We have to continue building. We have 30,000 people, roughly, moving here every year.
Yeah.
And now that'll stop if we keep screwing up. But we do have a lot more people moving here. So we do have to build. We just need to be smarter about how we're doing it.
Absolutely. Like real big cities are. So you're running against this Trump-like Republican, and then you mentioned there was another candidate in the race. So tell me about the other candidate.
The other candidate is an interesting person. She's a Green Party candidate. She jumped in the race on the last day to qualify. She didn't have an opponent, so no one has really seen her name until now.
Well, she was a soil and water.
Oh, yeah. We saw her name this week in the paper. That was fascinating. Yeah, she apparently was successful at running on the Soil and Water Conservation Board and had been on it. And I believe it was a countywide position as well.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, she didn't use very good judgment on a government trip that she took recently.
Right.
And that investigation served in such a way that she had a choice of being removed by Governor Scott for the position.
Yeah, because I think one of her counterparts said that if she didn't resign, they were going to ask Governor Scott to
remove her.
Right.
Yeah. So she decided she wanted to have, I guess, a future in politics, and she resigned, thinking it wasn't going to get out there. So my bigger challenge is, while I don't see her as a viable candidate, she's not really taking much in the way in the polls, but her name recognition may cause me to not be successful because it's a real problem. I've been advertising vote for Kim for the last year and a half.
And that's what you mean by name recognition, because you have the same name and it's very similar, the same first name, and then your last name is
How someone found Kim O'Connor, I have no idea. But whatever you do, vote for Kimberly Overman because it is causing some real serious challenges with people who aren't very familiar with politics.
Right.
And they just see what I've been advertising for the last year and a half, which is vote for Kim. They may accidentally vote for a candidate that's not ready for the job.
Right. Okay, well, that tells me a bit about your opponents. Now tell me about county commission for people who aren't that engaged or aren't even necessarily that familiar. How many elected officials are there on the county commission? And kind of tell me a little bit about the dynamics on that board right now.
Okay. There are 7 county commissioners that serve 1.4 million people in Hillsborough County. It is one of the largest counties and larger than some of our states.
Seven.
7.
Yeah. 7 other states.
Yeah, exactly. And these 7 individuals make decisions for a very large number of people in very diverse communities. We have urban areas and rural areas and suburban areas.
Right.
We have all the wonderful resources that we have here in Florida, but they aren't limitless. So it's important that they make smart decisions, not only for what the growth that we need, but also to take care of our environment that is oftentimes very fragile at times.
Very.
There are 4 single-member districts and 3 countywide districts. Those 4 is basically divides up Hillsborough County in 4 parts.
So everybody has one district member or elected official that represents them in their district.
Exactly.
So the county is divided into 4.
Right.
And then 3.
Right. 3 countywide seats.
So we have 4 representatives at County Commission who represent us at all times.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And
assuming they're all on the same page.
And so currently, is there a majority for one party or the other on the county commission?
For the last several years, maybe as long as 10 or more, there have been 5 Republicans and 2 Democrats. So the Republicans for the last, say, 20 years or so have had a supermajority on any decisions that have been made. And we can see where that's left us.
Where do you think that's left us? Tell me a little bit about where you think where the challenges are that you plan to address when you're elected.
Well, for starters, we're 30 years behind in building an infrastructure that actually serves a community that's been growing.
Only 30 years.
Just 30.
It feels like more, honestly.
We've been behind when I got here 34 years ago, but I thought maybe we were going to do something between now and then.
So county infrastructure.
County infrastructure, when it comes to not only roads, but also transit, we are the lowest funded per person towards transit in an urban area or urban area in the country. So the lowest spend per person on transit, which is needed given that we have 1.4 million people living here. And we have areas that are very dense, but we have a lot of sprawl. We have sprawled all over the county. And now we can't afford to provide the services for those communities because we've not been good stewards of the tax dollars, nor have we had good policies to make sure that we're investing appropriately for the communities that have been built in this area.
So where would you say the majority of money has gone on a project, let's say? Do you think that it's been spent where it's cost efficiently to make sure that the infrastructure is being built, or do you generally find that a lot of money goes towards maybe county commissions, friends who have bid for the job privately, that spend a lot of money and maybe aren't the best people for the job? What do you think about that?
Well, we've invested in things that aren't necessarily a majority of the people who live here's priorities.
Okay.
For example, there was many years ago, we passed a CIT or a community investment tax in order to invest in schools.
And when you say we, was that something the voters voted in?
Voters actually voted that
in.
And
that was on a ballot?
It was on a ballot.
Okay.
And it was to use towards education and other community-related projects.
Okay.
Well, we haven't used it fully for education in a way that has actually served our schools well. And we decided to use some of it for the stadium for, where the Rays and USF both play. I mean, the Bucks and the USF both play. And that has actually left such a bad taste in our mouth that when people have been trying to come up with a solution for losing baseball to our area. We are a sports town in many ways. A lot of people do play and enjoy sports. We live in an area where you can play all year round.
Right.
So sports is very important to a large segment of our community. But it isn't the priority when it comes to what government should be involved in.
Right.
And I think if we reprioritize and put citizens first, we would be a much better steward of the resources that we have in our county for our citizens.
Now, I want to go back because we're going to bring it up later on. But for people who aren't as familiar with a lot of the terms that we're talking about when we talk about infrastructure, you said that there's a lot of sprawl, and we're going to talk about that later. How can you define sprawl, and what does that mean? And, when you're trying to explain it to people who don't necessarily understand city planning. Understood.
As a community grows, typically in many, many decades ago, or centuries ago, actually, when a community grows, it starts with a hub, normally like a Main Street area or a business area, and the residents, will grow around that, or a residential area, and then the businesses grow inside. Hillsborough County started out with 2 downtowns. One was actually downtown, where Davis Island and Harbor Island, which was nothing when I got here, didn't have anything on it, But that was a port area, and that's where Tampa sort of got its start.
Because a lot of cities grow around the port because that's how they got their goods and services.
There were 2 things that occurred that helped Tampa grow. One was the rail that came in. Our area was founded with the rail coming here.
So CS, the Amtrak tracks they use now.
Henry B. Plant brought the Plant Railroad to Tampa to bring the military people that were here when we were dealing with the Spanish-American War way back when.
Okay.
So our town was actually originally developed as a consequence of having rail be a source of ways that people could get around. It came down into Tampa where there was a port. So you could take goods and services all through the Gulf region.
Had better transportation back then.
Yeah, that's what founded this community.
We've regressed.
Exactly. We kind of forgot all of that.
So there were 2 downtowns. Where was the other one?
Largely the West Shore area.
Okay.
So there's where we ended up with an airport and it connected us to Pinellas. It was a nice sort of gateway area, like the gateway area we have over in Pinellas. So those 2 business hubs had growth around it for the longest time.
Right.
And the town sort of grew up through Carrollwood, and then Tampa started growing very, very quickly. It grew up through to North Tampa, which is now all the way to the county line.
Right.
And then gradually we moved east to the Brandon, Riverview, Fishhawk area.
Right.
The challenge we had is we were always behind the power curve in building the roads and the schools to serve the massive amount of growth that was coming. And as a consequence, many of the communities now are served by 2-lane roads.
Right.
And that's not an easy thing to do when you're coming out of what I call a teardrop community plan, where developers have built basically a whole bunch of houses in a big bag with one way in and one way out.
Sure.
And no markets or main street inside those communities. So everyone has to get in their car and drive to the highway and drive down the highway to go to the grocery store or their doctors or their CPA's office or...
So it's more like residential areas without any infrastructure?
Without the infrastructure, right. Without having that market so that you could build walkable communities. And in most urban communities that haven't been developed the way Florida has, there's a grid system.
Right.
So you have multiple ways to get around. So you don't have speeding and people being run over by cars and bicycles being knocked off the road. You have sidewalks where people can actually walk in a healthy environment to help keep people healthy.
Right.
And you have your stores and things close by along with your schools. Unfortunately, in the 60s, we became a much more car-centric community.
Right.
And we yanked up all of the trolley lines and the streetcar lines. And we built highways. And with Governor Scott's mandate for no road widening without tolls, which I believe is an economic racist type of strategy.
Yeah.
It leaves too many people off the opportunity to take advantage of what that tax dollar is going to get spent on.
Right.
I find that to be
or even just be able to use the highway itself.
Right, exactly. Exactly. So there are ways to develop communities where you're using street smart development practices. And there are developers that want to build smart communities.
Right.
But there's not ever been, more recently at least, a true dialogue between the planning commission that decides, how we're going to grow over the long haul with communities, but how to grow on the long haul. And then what has been asked to do. There's no dialogue there between the builders and the planning department that actually is constructive to meet the citizens' needs.
Absolutely. That's a nice way of putting it. So in that case, so we're talking about county commission. We're talking about how, we haven't built the infrastructure that we've needed, that for a majority of the the past decades, there's been a Republican control on the county commission. It leads me to kind of think about some of the shenanigans that I've been seeing happening, where the majority of Republicans are so interested in keeping their control that they've kind of engineered this musical chairs that we're seeing now that you referred to, where you thought Sandy Merman was going to vacate and run for another district, and she didn't. And every commissioner who's term limited in their district are playing switcheroo and chairs. And then there was this thing where they tried to change the way that we were districted so that we had less countywide coverage. And that got shot down, and then they tried to do the nonpartisan municipal officers, where we had, supervisor of elections and property appraisers, which have been partisan seats forever, and they tried to make sure that that was removed in fear of some kind of Democratic blue wave, to make sure that, those seats are kind of kept anonymous. And that was actually fought by the Hillsborough County Democratic County. They hired a pro bono attorney who said that that was actually voter suppression. And from what I heard, on both sides of the party were considering that voter suppression. So it sounds like, aside from poor infrastructure, that right now and planning, the priority seems to be keeping those seats in the majority, regardless of whether those tactics are ethical or if there's any integrity to kind of keep that majority. Is that something that you would agree with in what you're seeing in this kind of election period?
Yes. Okay. So my two slogans.
Yes.
Okay. That and really one of the reasons I'm running is, one is a new day for Hillsborough County. And the other, and this is something I've always said, that leadership matters.
Right.
We have, the week of qualifying week, when all these people were jumping into the race, and everybody started moving around, and even I had, one of the Democrats jump out of another race into my race. I called it the candidate shuffle week.
Right.
We had an event called the candidate shuffle, because what was happening is, for example, Ken Hagan was in District 5, and he's termed out. And he's been in office, I think, as much as 24 years or some absurdly long period of time, where we have, with the county commission, 4-year terms. So you can run for re-election in your district and serve 8 years.
Yeah.
And now you can also run in your own district that you live in for 4 years or 8 years. So that would give you 16 years.
Yeah.
But we've had candidates that are literally moving around the county so that they can not only run countywide for 3 different countywide seats, but also in multiple individual districts. That kind of violates the whole spirit of the law of term limits.
Yeah.
And while it does take about 10 years for a transportation plan to get implemented, so I could see why someone would want to stay, 2 terms or even a third to get the work finished through. What we have witnessed over the last 20 years really is, in my opinion, skirts the law, the spirit of the law.
Yeah.
But it's not illegal, unfortunately. So I would like to see a move towards some term limits.
Right.
I don't necessarily think it needs to be just, you can only run in your district, or because I can't run in my own district.
Right.
But I do think it does need to have some controls of it, because especially when we have politics and money so wrapped up into it, when you've been in office, you know where the money is. When you haven't been in office, you don't know where it is, and you need to have it in order to be competitive.
Right. Sure.
So it is very difficult for a new person who may have all the qualifications to be successful running against long-term incumbents.
Absolutely. It's part of the problem that I feel we have in politics in general, but we can save that for another podcast. So we've kind of talked about county commission as is, and really briefly, because I think we've touched on a lot of it, which revolves around infrastructure and obviously transportation. What other issues, especially not necessarily that are in your platform, but when you're out and you're knocking doors and you're coming in contact with so many different diverse people within the county, what are at the forefront of the issues that they tell you they care about, whether they understand it's in the scope of county commission or not? What are the issues that you're seeing across the board as being at the forefront of Hillsborough County's minds?
I'm glad you asked that question. There are lots of folks that feel as though their voices aren't heard. And they have very good reason for that. When we haven't invested in infrastructure, or we haven't invested in helping people get to work, it means we also haven't invested in creating and supporting good jobs. So we have a very low wage base on average. We have very low median income, or the average income for families in this area. But we have policies that adopt ways that people have to spend a great deal to survive. If you don't have a car in Hillsborough County, you're not fully employed. If you're not fully employed, then you don't have the resources you need to help your kids be successful in school. If you're not fully employed and your neighbors aren't fully employed, you find yourself in a community that ends up failing because we don't have the resources they need.
And if you're not fully employed, you probably don't have access to health care.
Exactly. And you can't plan for retirement. There's no financial stability, which is what I do. I help people make financial decisions in life by helping them look into the future and figuring out where they are now and what steps they can take to move forward. There's no steps with our policies. So we have to be more forward thinking on how we include all of our communities in the equation when we're coming up with solutions, while at the same time also recognizing we can't abuse our environment to get that done.
Yeah, that's a good thing to point out. Absolutely.
We have only a limited amount of water if we're not smart about how we use it. We only have a limited amount of land unless we want to pave over the entire county. That also provides us with water and wildlife and quality of life.
Sure.
So going back to the basics of the values of, in my case, a Democratic Party, where families come first and community comes first, and being kind to our neighbors. It is, I think, incumbent on us to have leaders that haven't forgotten that. So that our policies match our rhetoric instead of our rhetoric leaving out good policy.
So it sounds like what you've been finding that people have been voicing to you regardless is they feel disconnected from their representatives, their leadership.
Well, and they don't understand how it happens.
They
don't know why they don't have transportation. They don't know why we don't have good roads. They don't know why we're concerned about the sheriff's department and the first responders having or not having what they need to be good stewards and responsible servants to our communities.
And teachers and education.
And education is, constitutionally, that's all the legislators are supposed to do, is fund that. And we haven't done that well. The county commission doesn't do that as much.
Sure.
But they have a responsible role in how we grow and communicating that to the school board so that they are prepared for building and maintaining the schools that our children are in.
Right, because they buy the schools are on land, and county commission oversees the land, and so there's definitely a relationship.
There is a good relationship.
Absolutely,
it hasn't been a good one, but there is a relationship.
there is a needed relationship.
Absolutely.
Okay, so tell me just shortly as well a little bit about your platform. I know that you have a ton on there, but you gave me this nice little photoed piece of literature, and you have some key points in there. So tell me about the pillars of your platform.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, one of the reasons we're in the pickle that we're in with the sales tax referendum and two of them going against each other and all of that argument, as well as being 30 years behind, is because we haven't had good leadership. So that's one thing. Putting our citizens first in our decision-making process and having a transparent, accountable county government is one of the first things. We can solve a lot of problems if we're able to achieve those two goals.
So when you say you're putting them first, because not to say that that's ingenuine, because I truly believe that you mean it, but I don't think that necessarily translates to people how they're going to be more empowered. So do you mean making the ability to contact county commission more accessible? Are you talking about changing meeting times? Are you talking about just voter education on these issues? Because those are kind of the forefront of when I'm thinking about, feeling more reflected in leadership. So tell me a little bit more detail about what that means.
Well, for starters, I think all county commission meetings should actually be televised for those that can't get to county commission. I would like to, in my case, I will make a commitment of having town hall meetings all around the county, working with the neighborhood associations to make sure that I'm listening to the concerns and aware of those concerns. There is no two-way dialogue using social media that is effective in helping people voice their concerns or report something they needs attention. So that I think we can use technology to help make that better. But I do believe that transparency is necessary.
Right.
And I will suggest to you, being on the Citizens Advisory Committee, and we make recommendations, and we watch them deliberate, and then we've made all these recommendations, and they do just the opposite.
Sure.
Something's not being disclosed.
Right.
And I think that is something that's critically important. Sunshine laws require things to be done in the sunshine so everybody sees what's going on.
Right.
But there's very little enforcement or effective disclosure of conflicts of interest during those meetings that require a county commissioner to divulge there's a conflict of interest when they are making a decision on something. We need to readopt that.
I like the analogy of bringing the sunshine back in.
Yeah, bring the sunshine back into sunshine law. The other issues are they all sort of dovetail with each other.
Sure.
Obviously, if we are more transparent and we are better stewards of our monies, we will have better fiscal responsibility in how we spend our tax dollars on behalf of our citizens. That will allow us to invest in communities in a good way across the board.
Right.
That will help create jobs so that we are more attractive to large corporations that might pay better benefits and better wages and allow the fight for 15 to be a moot point, hopefully someday.
Right.
Because it actually takes about $25 an hour to meet the minimum necessary to live in Hillsborough County.
Yeah. And we've had that number quoted quite a bit with different people who've come on, regardless of whether it's at the state level or so that seems to be a pretty good hard and fast number.
And then the last is that dovetails with transportation, environment, smart growth, and economic opportunity is the environment. I think it's critically important that we don't forget how smart planning will help us protect the environment. And where we are more
Conscious?
Yeah, more conscious, but also balance the decisions between what citizens need and what private corporations need. There are ways to mitigate when there's damage done to wetlands, but it's not the preferred way of operating.
Right.
If we don't build in wetlands, then we don't have that problem.
Right.
So I think if creating some balance, because finding ourselves in paradise and ruining it, it doesn't come back.
Yeah.
You can't recover from some things. And I think we need to be a lot more, have a lot more vision and a lot less short-sighted when we're making decisions as far as leaders are concerned.
It makes me think of that Edie Brickell song, Pave Paradise and Put a Parking Lot.
Right.
So that kind of covers one thing I was going to ask you, because one thing I've noticed recently coming before the county commission and even city council actually is a big push all of a sudden from people who owned privatized wetlands or conservations or different areas where there have been rules for not to develop, but the people who own those areas seem nervous about maybe a switch in county commission or whatnot, and seem to be pushing all of a sudden for more development of areas where we've conserved them or they're not supposed to develop. And I've seen that come up. So I just wanted to ask you about your commitment to kind of preserving those areas, but it sounds like you've answered it already, and that is built into the platform. So it kind of, I'm going to jump back and forth here because my next question was going to kind of talk about, some of the issues more specifically. But as you talk about these things, and one of the questions I was going to ask you was, how your platform or how when you were running, it would appeal to Republicans or, because we're so divided now, everything is this partisan right down the middle and everybody falls strictly on either side of the issue. And there are all these, words people use to inflame each other. And I'm looking at this and I'm listening to what you're saying and I'm trying to put myself in the mind of a Republican and how saving our environment where, we all live here because it's beautiful, or talking about making sure there's transparency and leadership, or making sure that we're spending our money correctly, or providing the infrastructure we need to, provide opportunity to everyone, how anyone can be against that. So I know that you're a Democrat and we're going to talk about some Democratic issues, but tell me what you think, in your platform should not be a partisan issue or that could appeal to people who might be Republicans.
I think the policies that I have in mind that will encourage companies to come here, typically I would say is more of the standard Republican jobs
right.
conversation. We all want to have jobs. We all want to have good jobs. But we do have to be smart about what we attract. Jobs for just jobs' sakes, honestly, is not a good plan.
That's true.
But if we're able to invest in our students and invest in our science and technology and invest in good resources for entrepreneurs that are interested in starting new businesses, lots of things can happen. We can bring companies and be attractive to companies that will bring good jobs
right.
and benefits. But we also allow an opportunity for our students that want to come back from college to invest in businesses.
Right.
Those are typically things that Republicans want to stay focused on.
Sure.
And I think that supports all of our communities.
Right.
If we are strong in doing several things, if we have a balance in our education system of both higher education as well as trades,
right.
we'll have an opportunity to build the buildings we need to build because we'll have the workforce prepared
right.
for being able to do that. We've been so myopic about
micro-focused.
Yes, exactly. Micro-focused on specialized schools and high tech and science and technology, so that we've forgotten that to build a house,
right,
you got to have a carpenter that knows what they're doing.
And for those of us who have to outsource that job, we know it's very hard to find a good, handy person who understands and has the skills and the knowledge to be able to do that kind of stuff.
Exactly. So recognizing there's an opportunity for diverse job force, workforce,
right,
is critically important, and we haven't really done that very well.
So this is the other thing I'm thinking, because I know that a tax is one of the biggest issues, that you just say anything about any kind of tax and Republicans foam at the mouth, that it's just it's their trigger point. They're so anti-tax. And I understand that, right? Because not everybody doesn't want to pay more money for things.
Sure.
And a lot of people are worried that the money we are already allocated is abused by the authorities that regulate it. So if we throw more money at it, it's just allowing more abuse. But I'm not sure if a lot of people really understand when we're talking about the tax referendums, such as the transportation or the education referendum, one, that these are short-term taxes. Some are 10 or 25 years. They're not indefinitely. Two, that a lot of them are going to have oversight committees. So it's not just going to be the same elected officials managing them. But three, that it's a need for our entire community. And it's not just transportation doesn't just affect people who don't have cars or don't love their cars. When you're talking about transportation and building this infrastructure, that it's for everybody, and that without it, I mean, I could be over dramatizing, but it feels like our city is kind of doomed, because at this point we just don't have the money and the budget to, like you say, manage the growth that we have. It's not even it's just a matter of we won't be able to build the schools in developing neighborhoods, or we won't be able to fix the roads in areas, not even put in mass transportation, but just maintenance the roads that we have. So how do we talk about these important issues, especially the tax referendums that we absolutely need, without, just letting that word become divisive and turn off people who are so afraid of the word tax?
Well, last time I checked, there's nothing in this world that's free. And our structure for paying for things historically has been through our property tax and usury fees, which in this case has been, to deal with our growth, has been impact fees and mobility fees.
And mileage fees?
We don't have mileage fees yet, but we that's what our toll roads end up being. But impact fees and mobility fees are fees that are tacked on top of the cost of a purchase, of buying a home, to pay for the infrastructure of that community when it's built. Well, we haven't had any political will for sticking with that program, and we waived it, so we can't afford to actually support those communities.
Right.
So we're behind that power curve. And so since we haven't been charging it, we're in a hole. So this citizens initiative that's come forward to pay for our infrastructure is largely due to the lack of leadership, which is why it's the first thing on my list. Because we can't, there's nothing that's free.
Sure.
We have to pay for it somehow. And by not paying for it, we're hurting our opportunity.
And I mean, this isn't just for city. These are people who live
everywhere.
Suburbia aren't going to be able to have the schools. And when we're talking about transportation, that could be school busing. That could be, I mean, we're talking, there's no one who's safe or in a safe area that's not going to be impacted by the fact that we don't have enough money in our budget for transportation, for city issues, for county issues, for education, if we don't find another way to provide more funding.
Exactly.
Would you say that's true?
That is very true.
Okay.
And the sales tax is one way of filling in that hole. It also gives us an opportunity to quickly fund that hole. In other words, with the sales tax, because it's 30 years long, typically when you have a 30-year tax, you can borrow against it. Just like when you don't pay for all your house right up front, right? You have to get a mortgage and you pay for it over time, but it gives you that cash up front to buy the home.
Right.
Well, bonding in government finance of a revenue stream like a sales tax over 30 years gives you the ability to borrow against it to do that work right up front. So, for example, 45% of the money of that sales tax, if it passes, is going to go towards HART. HART has a plan. We've just basically tried to starve it to death. So
tell people what HART is.
HART is Hillsborough Area Regional Transit, or transit. And so they provides our buses currently, and our shuttle rides and our rides for the people with disabilities. And it helps provide ways that people can get around other than in their car.
Right.
And so if HART suddenly had money, they could buy all the buses they need. They could build another maintenance yard for maintaining those buses, because right now the one they have is at capacity. And because we don't buy more buses because we don't have more room to work on them is just ludicrous to me. So having that money up front would allow us to purchase more buses, to provide better services and more frequency so more people would use them.
Why would people who have cars and jobs that don't rely on that care about that?
Well, because the reason we are dealing with the congestion we have now, the reason you're sitting in traffic every single day is because there is no other choice but to get in your car, and you see more what's called single occupancy vehicle design. We have one person in a car, and every one person is in their car. A bus can hold 60 or 80 people.
So it would help with congestion and traffic.
It would also help with reliability. When every single time you find yourself stuck because there's a car accident up the road, you have no way to usually get anywhere else or use other ways to get around.
Right.
Having all that money up front might give us the ability to purchase, let's say, the CSX lines. And you would end up...
Which are the railroad lines.
Which is the railroad lines in the area that run all around Hillsborough County.
Right.
If we were able to purchase those lines and use those lines, it would create development. It would give you more reliable way to get around.
Mm-hmm.
They move rather quickly as opposed to sitting light to light to light.
Right.
Unlike a lot of people see the trains we have now that are freight trains who move forever slow and are forever long. You know, a commuter train runs really quickly and gets through the intersection quickly. So it would help with congestion, whether or not you ever get out of your car.
Right.
If you have an alternative and it runs quickly and frequently enough, you don't lose your job when your car breaks down.
Would it also give people more accessibility to our jobs?
Absolutely.
And would that help maybe people who have to rely on public assistance? Maybe if you were someone who didn't understand the need for public assistance, if you don't understand that, another alternative would be actually providing job opportunities for people. Right. So
there's a large population in Hillsborough County of people that aren't able to drive for one reason or another.
Right.
There's a lot of people legally should not be driving, but have no other choice but to be in a car. And if they should not be driving because they screwed up somehow,
right?
You know, we actually force them to get it behind the wheel again because there's no alternative, and that's not a good plan.
Yeah.
But there is also young people and seniors and people with disabilities that would prefer or can't drive. And we limit their opportunities significantly. And it's the bus system right now does require for those that have no other choice but to use it, usually a 2 to 3 hour commute one way.
Yeah.
Because of the lack of consistent routes, the lack of frequency, and the lack of connectivity. That in itself is what I call an economic opportunity drain on a community. And it causes an enormous amount of dysfunction and unhappiness. And I'd like for the pursuit of happiness to get back into our goals.
All right. So I was gonna cover some of the specific issues, especially that we in the Progressive Caucus care about, which really transcend partisanship. But you've actually covered some of them, so I'm just gonna ask about a few that we haven't just talked about in general here, because one of the things I was surprised that when I was reading over your endorsement form again, was there was a good amount of focus on legalizing marijuana or making medical marijuana more accessible. And I know that that's an issue and I've said this probably 3 other times on the podcast, but when we host meetings, the meeting that we had the largest response to was when we were talking about medical marijuana and recreational marijuana. And we even had members of Republican Party come out, especially one gentleman who was dealing with cancer and was having a challenge getting access to what he needed. So I was surprised to see that highlighted in your application when I was rereading it again. So tell me a little bit about your stance on that and how you think it can help our county.
Well, for starters, my father was very ill a lot of his life, and he tried to use traditional medicine in order to treat himself, and he finally gave up on it and learned a great deal about alternative medicines. So that taught me to open my eyes to other ways that you could to maintain your health and be healthy, besides just being responsible about your health. But also, I have family that lives in Colorado, and I happened to be there the year it migrated from medical marijuana being approved to adult use marijuana, which is what I prefer to call it.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Rather than
You're the second candidate who said that. Yes. Thank you.
Because it really isn't about, making it available to everyone.
Sure.
It's about making sure that adults have the ability to be responsible for themselves and the responsibility to be responsible for themselves.
Right.
Have access to something they would like to use. In the case of the medical marijuana, I've witnessed people that had access to it get better as a consequence of using it for a variety of ailments. It's a plant.
Right.
Okay. Now, we've hybridized it to the point where some of it is almost at dangerous levels. And not having any legal access to almost either of them at this point, what the Department of Health has done in the voter referendum that was passed by over 70% to continue to not only restrict access to the appropriate method of healing themselves when they've gone through the process of getting the license.
Right.
That what our state has done is created a drug cartel. And the limiting access, limiting the growth, and limiting the licenses has done nothing to help mitigate access for individuals that need it for medical marijuana. I have sent numerous mothers to other states because their child was not going to survive the epileptic damage or the damage to their brains for the multiple epileptic seizures their children were having all day long. And desperate trying to get help, desperate trying to get into the resources, and had already bankrupted themselves trying to take care of their family. Now getting to the point where it's so expensive they can't get it is a travesty. So my first issue is take the cartel and the pharmaceutical industry method of delivering medical marijuana to those that need it for their health care. Immediately. That needs to happen.
Right.
Joe Redner's been a very strong proponent of my campaign. I've watched him fight diligently for his health and for access, and I admire his courage because he has not given up. And apparently had a little bit of a win this week, so I'm really glad to hear that.
I missed that one already.
But the year I was out in Colorado helping my sister after she had major surgery recover from that surgery, was the year that recreational marijuana was coming into place.
Right.
And so I listened on the news every single night, all of the scare tactics that everybody was going through, trying to figure out how to deal with the fact that it was all going to be recreational.
Sure.
And you know what? They figured it out. And they tax it.
Right.
And now they have schools that are well-funded. They have parks that are well-funded. They have more money than anybody would have expected, to the point where they're giving tax money back to taxpayers because it's generating so much in the way of revenue. How stupid can we be? We talk about wanting to fund these things and have a balanced budget, and yet our us and them policies
and
is not really working to serve our citizens very well.
I've seen county commission have an effect on this because they voted how many dispensaries we could have open. And I had actually gone down. They were going to limit it, I think, to 9, and then maybe they doubled it to 18. But even at the county level, they're restricting access and allowing monopolies to grow and only giving license to so many people who pay a certain amount and making the market more of a challenge and not allowing entrepreneurship in that market as well, even at the county level.
Right. So in what world would it be rational to say we are going to count the number of Walgreens we have in the county and decide we're only going to have 25?
Right.
Where would that ever enter any normal conversation? Nowhere.
Right.
But when it comes to medical marijuana, whether it be medical or otherwise, we're going to decide to create limited supply, which drives the price up. That's basic economics.
Sure.
Limit the supply and drive the price up so that we can control something that the voters have said they want.
Right. So let's just hit some bullet points, and then I'm going to go on and talk about one other thing because we're running long. But I know that some people are just going to ask, do you support women's rights to choose?
Oh, absolutely.
And what about church and state? Do you think that there needs to be a clear separation between church and state?
Absolutely.
How about healthcare? Do you think that healthcare should be accessible to everyone?
Of course.
Do you think healthcare is a human right?
I do. And I know it's not affordable for most people. So we have to come up with a better way of delivering it.
Do you think that might be Medicare for all?
I don't know. Hillsborough County has a very good health program. And it's a pretty good program. It needs to be a little expanded a little further. And it'll bridge the gap between private pay and that until we have a universal health care program. I'd love to see that. Clearly, as a county commissioner, I can't change that magic wand and make it work.
Right.
But I do want to work with the legislators that are running now and those that end up getting elected in November to do what we can to enhance and maybe expand Medicaid as a starting place, which we've not done, and then continue to expand our current health program within the county until we can get a better dialogue about what's going on a national basis.
Now, I know you mentioned the Fight for 15. I'm assuming that means that you also are supportive of unions and union rights.
Absolutely.
And then I know that affordable affordable housing is at the forefront. And I've seen that a lot in your platform and some of the answers that you gave on your questionnaire for the Progressive Caucus. So I'm assuming that affordable housing is at the forefront of
It is. It's not on my slate card, but it's wrapped up into all the other issues we talked about. Well, I think what's critically important is that the counties work with the state legislatures to help them understand that sweeping the Sadowski funds is not going to happen because that's the trust money that voters have set aside for affordable housing, and we need to actually be able to utilize it for that purpose. And then we do need to develop some good programs that not only incent good, smart housing developments or infill projects, but more importantly, work with the developers to provide affordable housing, because right now what's being built isn't anywhere near that.
Yeah, and it's a problem across the board. I think that, again, it's another issue where a lot of people think, oh, if I'm, upper middle class, that doesn't necessarily resonate with me, or I own a house and it doesn't matter. And they hear some of these issues and they think like marginalized communities. But, if you're trying to bring a loved one who's elderly here, find house care for them, or like you said, you have children who want to go to school and maybe don't want to live in the dorms, like affordable housing affects everyone, not just, communities where you think, they don't have the money to live somewhere. It affects everybody. Yeah. So I think that, we need to make sure that everybody understands that is a crisis facing the entire community and not just one subset of the population.
Here's a reality check. The median income for a household of 4 in Hillsborough County is $50,000.
Wow.
If 20 of it is going to the 2 cars for the 2 wage earners, that leaves you $30,000 to live on. You pay $1,200 rent
and that's
house
if you get
payment.
Lucky.
That's if you're lucky, right? There doesn't leave much for food or anything else.
Right.
We have got a financial planning problem.
Yeah.
And our policies aren't matching what we need to do to be able to help people be successful.
Yeah, I don't think there's a better way to say it. So one thing I want to touch on quickly was, at the Progressive Caucus, it was not a popular opinion, but during the primary, we endorsed both you and Sky White, much to the dissatisfaction of many people. But, as you know, because you filled out the questionnaire, we have a process in place where we evaluate the questionnaires at the state level and the local level. We really, really look at the answers. And then we look at how viable a campaign is, whether that's based on fundraising or getting out the vote. And honestly, we felt that both you and Sky were progressive and great candidates. And many people were displeased to have you running against each other. And I know that's a sentiment. You said that you were glad you got to know her, but probably, that she was one that you wish you didn't have to run against. And it sounds like since the election, you and Sky have been working together and you've been learning more about, especially with affordable housing, some things that are at the forefront of her platform and being really reflective and opening. And so tell me, I know you had said you were hoping Sky would come on, and we were hoping as well because we'd love to have her on this podcast, but unfortunately she's so busy trying to save the world. Our schedules don't match up. Tell me a little bit more about post-election relationships you've built or work you've been doing with Sky and how that affects what we're looking at in this election.
I will tell you, running against Sky was very frustrating.
Sure.
I think the world of her. And the more I got to know her, the more frustrating it got.
Sure.
Because we both are just as passionate about taking care and serving this community. We are both on the page that we've got to change the dynamic of the Hillsborough County Commission. That if we want to be in the same place 4 years from now or worse, we will give up the seat fighting against each other. And we both agreed that was not a good plan. So when the two of us were both endorsed, it wasn't a surprise because she is so bright and so brilliant. And while she didn't have quite as much job experience when it comes to serving in government roles,
Right.
her passion and how fast she learns is a testament to how awesome she is.
Sure.
And so by the end of when we're getting close to the end of the primary, both of us were just, we'd get done with the canvas, the candidate forums. We'd walk out and give each other big hugs. Okay,
Right.
see you next week. We've got really, really close.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think our campaign staff had all that figured out, how much the two of us truly admired each other.
Mm-hmm.
With that, since the election, since the primary,
Yeah.
Sky has come out in full support of the campaign because she knows how critically important it is that we win this seat. Opting out of this because we're disappointed that Sky, she did beautifully. She took second place. She took 20% of the vote, which is stellar.
Mm-hmm.
Stellar. In a 4-part race.
Yeah.
As a first-part candidate.
Especially with the fundraising,
I know,
that was all
I know.
grassroots. It was because
I'm so
people
impressed with
believed
how
in
well
her.
she did. And she
Right.
did well because she has all the right, we talked about all the right stuff.
Sure, right.
So she has joined the campaign. Along with Ray Sharamonte, who was also one of the primary.
Right.
And both of them are working diligently to make sure that we capture District 7 seat. It is critically important. If we want more of the same, opt out and don't vote all the way down ballot. If we need change in Hillsborough County, if we want people to have jobs, if we want to have decent roads, if we want to have transportation, if we want to attract good companies to come work here and be here, to make sure that we have the social services we can afford without cutting budgets, we have to capture this seat.
Absolutely.
Which means every single voter, no matter whether they're Democrat or an independent or even a Republican that wants to see Hillsborough County move forward,
Right.
needs to show up and vote for Kimberly Overman for County Commission District 7. Because I am the nominee.
Right.
Now, the only person that you really want to vote for. And I can say that because that's me.
Sure.
But I think, from the people that I've spoken to
Yeah.
on all sides of the fence, majority of people want common sense solutions. And that's what I bring to the table.
And I love that. And I will say one thing that I've seen Sky advocate for regardless, and be quite vocal about, even though sometimes I don't see the best response to it, is the fact that in government, especially local, at the city and county level, there's not enough diversity, specifically people of color, and also women, that it's kind of this, old boys club, and that not to say
boys club.
Not to say that there's anything wrong with that, because we certainly don't want white men to feel attacked. We love you, white man. But it's not reflective of our communities.
Right.
If we're trying to have government look like and be able to represent every single one of us, then government should look and be able to represent every single one of us.
Exactly.
And if we only have, whether it was all, just, women of color as the only voice on the commission or at city council, or, any one group, it wouldn't be able to necessarily advocate for every member of our community. So we absolutely need to see more diversity. And I think what a lot of people who supported Sky, and I could be making assumptions here, would love to hear is, when elected, that is also something that is going to be at the forefront of your goals and your agenda.
Oh, absolutely.
When elected to the commission, and that, what you'll do is make sure that you include, and help nurture and get elected people like Sky when she wants to run again, and, voices of diversity that are looking for that kind of support. So I think that's something that would definitely help reach out to those voters who might feel salty about the election.
I moved to a diversified community because I like being around diversified people.
Goes back to what you said.
Cultures. I grew up in DC. I had different languages and all different shades of people all around me in my childhood. And I enjoy that. I embrace that, which is why I moved to where I did. But to answer your question, absolutely. Yeah. One of the conversations Sky and I had is like, no matter where we are, let's figure out a way that we can better serve this community by creating diversity, creating opportunity, by embracing it. One of the things that I had suggested in a couple of other meetings, especially with the the CAC, the Citizens Advisory Committee to the Metropolitan Planning Organization is, they meet at 9:00 on a Wednesday in the morning.
Yeah.
Who can get away from a job to do that?
And how many minority voices would you say are on that committee?
There are 3 out of 15.
Okay.
I mean, there's a little bit of diversity there.
So it's not even in elected positions. It's in general.
It's volunteer. These are volunteers.
Right.
But we have to make it possible that across all the spectrums that citizens can participate.
Absolutely.
And, technology is a resource.
Not apparently in government or either Democratic parties or
where people can actually participate.
Right.
We're able to do that with grassroots. Why can't we do it in government? I don't understand.
Right.
So I am very much committed to creating as much diversity and embracing the diversity, not only inside government, but in that partnership.
Sure.
Because the better way that the leaders can have an opportunity to listen, the better opportunity they have to serve.
Well, I agree. I'm glad to hear you say that because you certainly know when elected that the Progressive Caucus will hold your feet to the fire.
I have no problem.
On all of these issues, as well as any of the supporters, that we have to make sure that not just what people are running on, but when they get into the office, that they're going to hold true to these. And I believe that you will.
Thank you.
And I appreciate you coming. I mean, I'd love to, I've seen you grow so much as a candidate. Luckily, we've always been able to kind of sit and I've been able to understand your platform, but it's hard to, when you're that passionate and you're that experienced and you have that much to say, get it into 20-second soundbite bites in candidate form. So I'm glad you had a chance.
That is the worst part about it.
To come on here and for people to be able to get a feel for you, your experience, your passion, your background, your commitment to things that we care about. So I hope that everyone's had an opportunity to listen to this and to support you, which is mostly important because you're not going to get elected and we're not going to take back our county if people don't know how they can help. So this is where we get to the fun part, where you tell me how people can get involved with your campaign, what you need, the best way for them to get that to you. Okay. Let our listeners know how they can support you.
Okay, well, terrific. My website is KimberlyOverman.com. Now, I do still own voteforkim.com, which points to the main website. But, and if you need to go to vote for Kim, that's fine.
Right.
But don't remember it's Kimberly Overman on the ballot.
Right.
On the website is not only information where you can link and send us emails. There's a volunteer page so that you can volunteer. We need canvassers. We need phone bankers. I need locations for large signs.
Okay.
I need money for large signs. And then I need locations for large signs. Because my opponent, Todd Marks, has them everywhere on every corner and every gas station all over the county. So
private businesses, if anyone knows that they can put a sign or areas that would be good to put a big one. If they want to sponsor
a sign at their location, I am all for it.
Great. Yeah. Okay.
And my email is vote@KimberlyOverman.com.
Now, how spell Overman for me?
It's Kimberly.
Okay.
O-V as in Victor, E-R-M-A-N.
Okay.
Now, I could say Overman, but I'm not that much of a radical feminist to go there. But I am a feminist.
I didn't get that until you said that part.
I've had some people go, well, how come you're saying it more clearly, Overman? And I said, because nobody knows how to spell it without it. So, but the good news is that you can always reach me that way. I do have a campaign phone number, which is 813 720-7719. I do have 2 people that are helping me keep my life from completely raveling apart because they're keeping this campaign going and helping me with phone calls and emails and everything else. Cassidy Whitaker is basically my on-site staff.
Okay.
She tells me where to go on a regular basis and where to be, and is helping me run the office. Okay. And I really appreciate her help and support. I don't have her phone number memorized yet, but you can email me or message our fan page, which is the Kimberly Overman for County Commission fan page. You message us there all day long if you'd like to, because we're
Is it on social media?
It's on Facebook.
Facebook. Okay, on Facebook.
We have an Instagram page, a Facebook page, a Twitter page, and the website is in place. You can volunteer there. You can help me buy things. I have planned 3.
A wish list?
I have planned 3 mailers.
Oh, okay.
with the name confusion and the fact that my opponent's political operative has a reputation of issuing a slander campaign 3 or 4 days before the election. We have to be prepared for a response. And so the best way to do that is to mail, because that's the quickest way to get it out there. Digital works. My commercials are awesome. They're on CNN and MSNBC, but we can't switch those very quickly. So we have to be able to budget for it. One mailer is $20,000 because I'm running countywide.
Right.
So I need to plan for 3. So I have no lack of need of resources. We're running a business for a short period of time. And the only revenues you've got to make that happen is campaign contributions. And a majority of mine are coming from individuals.
Right.
The unions are starting to help. The Democratic Party has helped as well. The majority of my contributions are coming from individuals. And so it takes every little bit to make it work. And I'm honored by those that are willing to invest in our future. So
if you feel moved by what you've heard today, if you feel like Kimberly is the best person to help lead our county into the future, please go to her website or find her on Facebook, give her some money, help her plant a sign. Make a few phone calls for her. A lot of them are just ballot chasing. You're not trying to persuade people. Or if you don't mind standing in the hot sun and knocking some doors, those are all great ways that we're going to get her elected. So thank you again for coming on. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Good luck. I feel good about it.
So the vote by mail ballots are out.
Right.
And the early voting starts on October 22nd and runs through November 4th, which is a Sunday, which is frequently called Souls to the Polls Sunday, before the election on Tuesday, November 6th.
Right.
So I have recommended to everyone, there's still time to sign up for vote by mail.
Yeah.
And so, and there's a great opportunity for you to be able to do that. What's great about early voting or vote by mail, on election day, you can call everybody you know and remind them to get out and vote.
Right.
And that's what I encourage everyone to do. Not only make sure you voted, but make sure everyone you know has gotten out an opportunity to vote. By taking advantage of the early voting days, but also by encouraging individuals that may not have gotten around to it and suddenly went, today's election day? Oh, my. It's like, all right, go. And just, put them in your car and take them. Drive them there. Call them every 10 minutes until they say, I did it.
Wow. Yes, I know that you're passionate about that because I've already got your text message asking if I plan to vote and engaging me about voting. So it looks like there's request to vote by mail goes all the way to October 31st. So Halloween, if you want to take advantage of that. Last day to register to vote if you're not registered already is the 9th. Like you said, early voting runs the 22nd to the 4th. And generally those are any public library, and you don't have to be in your own precinct or district. You can go to any.
There's 19 sites and then the county building. So and all of those are available on the Supervisor of Election site, which is votehillsborough.org. And you can go there and look up the early voting sites and find the closest library that you can vote in.
I love early voting. It's so easy. It's usually because I do vote by mail part of the time, but sometimes I really want to take my son in there and have him go through the whole process. It feels so, civic in there. But I never wait till election day because I'm worried if my car broke down or there was a horrible thunderstorm. Or I feel so nervous putting it all on one Tuesday.
I missed it once, and it was because I was flying back from California and my flight got delayed.
Yeah.
I was mortified.
Right.
Because we landed at 10 after 7, and I was just like, I can't believe I will never do that again. But I think what's really important for us to realize is that your vote is your voice.
Absolutely. Your power.
And we need to use it. We really seriously are at a place where we need to use it. The reason it's so important that you take advantage of early voting or vote by mail specifically this year is the ballot's long.
Oh, yeah.
We have a lot of races, with the state and federal.
We have a lot of races.
We have the county commission races. We have school board races. We have local amendments like the sales tax and
referendums.
Temple Terrace has got some city council.
They do. They're on our slate card too. If you haven't looked at the Progressive slate card. We've got all this information.
All of the larger amendments.
13, or I think they're 12 because they took 8 off.
I think they did.
Or 8 or 9.
They took several off, but there's some issues there. Mm-hmm. I'm a huge fan of making sure that we restore felons' rights. So
absolutely,
that's the one that I'm most focused on. Mm-hmm. But because the ballot is so long, go to the website, download your ballot so that you can fill it out ahead of time.
And then pick up a Progressive Caucus slate card.
Absolutely. and make sure that you're prepared for going in, because that way you'll be prepared for being able to just fill in the bubble rather than trying to read any of that legislation and get stuck with it and lose energy.
And I'm glad you brought this up, because for our listeners, we really haven't had a chance to talk about that. But the Progressive Caucus, aside from our candidates, which we've endorsed, and on the back, we included all down ticket candidates. That way people know all of the down ticket Democrats. But we are suggesting that all of our voters vote yes on both of the county tax referendums, and then vote no on all of the amendments except for 3, 4, 9, and 13, 4 obviously being one of the most important ones. And I know you brought up the Temple Terrace ones. We're actually suggesting to all of our voters to vote no on all of the ordinances, 1, 2, and 3. And we do have Temple Terrace elections on our slate cards. We have, like I said, the amendments, the referendums. We have the voting dates you've talked about. So we tried to make sure we had a super informative slate card. So if you haven't gotten one, you can go online. You can find them. We have them plastered all over. You can email me, Vaughn, V as in Victor, AUGHN, the number 30 at gmail.com, and get them, or I can get you in touch with any of our candidates. So thanks for reminding me about that. None of the other candidates have, and now that I get to give that a nice little plug. But now that we've talked for an incredibly long time, I want to thank you again. No, it's good. People need to know what's going on, and they need to know what their candidates stand for. Part of the problem is that we don't have enough information on our candidates and what's happening locally. As I always like to say, national is a big, crazy 24-hour reality show that you can't get away from, and then you can barely find out anything happening locally. So that's our goal. So thank you so much, Kimberly.
Thank you.
Making sure I'm saying Kimberly now. We appreciate it. Good luck on everything. We'll be calling you the very first day that you're elected to make sure that you're passing and supporting progressive legislation. So
no worries there.
Thanks again. And thanks to all of our listeners. We hope you have a great weekend, a great week, whatever you have in store for you. And thank you for listening.